Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Lisa, and welcome to Frequency Friday. This is part of my September reset, just to be a contribution. This is the last one for September because we're ending the month soon. It's the September 26th, 2025. How are you doing out there? If you're online and you want to comment, feel free. Let me know how you be. I hope you're doing okay wherever you are. Today, I'm going to talk about my signature method that I created called the Roar method. And this was, created probably about 15 years ago, I guess now. And we've recently gone through some updates and going to be putting new material out regarding Roar and all that jazz. In the next couple of months. But I wanted to talk to you today about something that is particularly related to the Roar method and why I find it so helpful. Let me give a little backstory first of all. So I've been working in trauma recovery with people and with myself all my life, but with people particularly for a good 3 decades now. And somewhere after like close to decade 2, I started noticing that when I would work with people live in other countries, online, or with people in my office, that there was something that I kept doing over and over and over again that I actually did with myself that really helped frame what was going on in people's brains with regards to their trauma and their triggers. Our triggers are our data. If you keep getting triggered by the same thing over and over and over again, you have to know that there's some unconscious belief that is getting poked at over and over and over again, not because the universe is a cruel energy that just wants you to be triggered. It's actually conspiring to bless you, to wake you up and say, hey, take a look at this. You actually have the capacity to change this now. Now, I'm not saying any of us really think that when the triggers are occurring. In fact, we're probably just spinning in our head, oh, this person's a jerk. Person's a jerk, and I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they did that. And can you believe that? And you go to this person and that person, and even your therapist over and 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 over again, because you think you're right to be so bothered by somebody else's behavior. It's a normal thing. We all get triggered. I get triggered. I still have some triggers, obviously, that I'm still working through, and I don't feel ashamed of that. I feel blessed that I have the possibility of being triggered. I do hate the feeling of being triggered because it like takes over your body and it takes over your energy, and then you have to devote so much time to it. That's the reason why I developed the Roar method, because I wanted to mitigate the time that I had to devote to being in a trigger and get myself through it as quickly as possible. I find it very valuable. My triggers are my data. Your triggers are your data. I find it very valuable to know what is going on when I'm triggered. And as I started teaching Roar classes and working more worldwide with beautiful beings like yourselves that might be listening to this, I learned that regardless of race, gender, socioeconomic class, age, or even place, countries, that there were started with 10, but now there's like 25 unconscious, subconscious beliefs that everybody has somehow. And that unconscious belief has got locked in to the neural net pathways, to the cellular memory, and that the light switch just goes on every time the trigger is reacted or awoken. And you do the same thing over and over and over again. The same sweat under your armpits, nut in your gut, obsessive loop in your head that you can't stop thinking about, calling and asking and talking about it over and over and over and over again. It's literally just a trigger. And what we're doing and what human behavior in those moments, myself included, is go to this person, that person, and the other person to gather more data about what's going on. And sometimes to see if you can gather more people to align with your point of view. As soon as you're trying to get somebody to align with your point of view and talking about it instead of going directly to the source themselves, which I don't think it's always possible to go directly to the source. You can go to your therapist. You can go to somebody that actually is an objective party who will reflect back to you what they experience you doing, if you're willing. Again, my favorite acronym this week is the HOW: honest, open, and willing. Those are the three qualities that would behoove all of us to understand our triggers and to basically learn how to respond versus react. And I think that's the highest goal of spiritual living: how to respond versus react, microcosmically within. And as we can see in the world right now, there's a lot of reaction going on. Do you think anybody's looking within? Absolutely not. So know that you would probably be unique to do this. But that uniqueness actually contributes to the balance on this planet of responding versus reacting. So that's what I'm offering you today. Take a look at the ROAR method if this feels like something that is useful to you. It really has been useful to me and to so many other people that have responded to me, letting me know how useful it's been to them through my books, through my classes, through my coursework, through sessions and things like that. So the universal unconscious beliefs, I believe we have a picture of those, are simply: I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm evil, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm nothing, I'm a nobody, I'm a no one, I'm separate, I'm alone, I'm a shame, I exist, no, I'm unimportant, I matter, no, I'm invisible, I'm dead, I'm a fraud, I'm crazy, I'm insane, I'm an alien, I'm weak, I'm stupid, I belong, no, I hate myself, and the past is more important than the present. There's a couple others that I have found that I'm going to add right now. I'm a victim. I'm a perpetrator. Thank you for putting those up. I'm a victim. I'm a perpetrator. I'm just going to leave it at that. So there's some belief systems to work with for yourself. If you are triggered, the next time you get triggered, and what I mean by triggered is if it spins in your mind and you think about the situation more than 5 times in an hour, you're triggered. And I want to offer you something that can help you actually get the information about why you're triggered. 50% of every problem is solved, or could be solved, if you just lean into what's going on. And it's okay. It's very courageous to say, gosh, I'm triggered right now. I got to figure this out. So how do you find out, like, if what unconscious belief you are acting from? Because maybe it's a situation like your partner or your spouse or your child did something that you took offense with. Let's say they talked to you in a way that called you a name, or they yelled at you, or they just vomited their upset to you, and your boundary was like, hey, please don't talk to me. Don't talk to me like that. I don't deserve it. And they go, well, absolutely, you deserve it. Well, they actually don't deserve it. But there's something inside of you that makes you feel like they do deserve it. That's the trigger I'm talking about. So that person, put them aside. Think about a situation right now where you were triggered. Whoever it is, put that aside. And then you start asking yourself, I wonder which one of these beliefs I'm actually reacting to. When my partner, when my child said what they said, and they talked to me in this dishonorable or disrespectful way, or they called me a name, or they called me a name or said something that I took as some sort of judgment or shame on me. What did that make me feel when I reacted? What was actually going on? Was I feeling unlovable? Was I feeling unworthy? Was I feeling, oh God, I'm evil? Was I feeling that I was bad? These are just feelings. They're just emotional states. The problem in what I see, even for myself and with people, is that that emotional state becomes that person's behavior. And then they carry it on. And the next person they interact with gets a piece of it. And then the person on the road that they're driving next to gets a piece of it, and a middle finger. And then the person at like Whole Foods when you're checking out and they're not going quick enough gets a piece of it. And. But really, if you take a moment to actually pause and say, gosh, what am I reacting to right here? Then you are going to actually become aware of some of these unconscious beliefs. Like, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm alone. That's a big one for people. Believe it or not, a lot of reaction comes because people feel like they're alone and feel like they're invisible and feel like they're insane and feel like they're stupid and feel like they're weak and feel like they hate themselves and feel like they don't belong and feel like they're nothing and feel like they're nobody and feel, notice I'm saying feel. At this point, right, you just want to check out and be like, okay, let's not talk about this anymore. Believe you me, I understand that. This is not like fun work, but I find it super useful if you have had any type of traumatic moments or reactive moments in your life that you are recovering from, trauma recovery. And I found through the ROAR method for myself and for others that if we could identify this unconscious belief by asking some questions about the trigger, we could actually mitigate the reaction and thereby mitigate the distance in relationships and mitigate the isolation in relationships and mitigate the verbal abuse in relationships and mitigate the disconnection in relationship and mitigate the getting fired from a job or bankrupting yourself or putting yourself in positions that are abusive. You can mitigate a lot of those things if you actually just get self-aware, self-responsible, become your own inner physician. But it does take what I call a tenacity of consciousness. 15 years ago, when I developed ROAR, I used the acronym ROAR, R-O-A-R, like the lion. One, because trauma recovery, addiction recovery, treatment-resistant depression recovery, generalized or pervasive or chronic anxiety recovery, CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, all those things that are a real part of a lot of people's experience in the world can actually be mitigated if you pay attention to what's going on unconsciously for you. Okay, this is not, I'm sure you're aware of this, but it really does take that roar, the ferocity of a lion, the tenacity of a lion. You don't mess with a lion. It will tear you to shreds. And I don't know about you, but there have been a couple of situations, more than I care to admit, but actually that's not true. I don't mind admitting it. I'm pretty much an open book about my story. It's just a part of my history, or as I like to say, her story. And I'm proud of myself to be able to move through the day without triggers, more so than I used to be able to move through the day every single day, a couple of times a day, maybe more than I actually care to admit, more than 12 times a day. I would easily be triggered back in the day when I wasn't as aware as I am now. And you as well. We always learn, we always grow. But I came up with the acronym ROAR, Radically Orgasmically Alive Reality, at the time because it was fitting in that moment to reclaim, because I was working with so many sexual abuse survivors, and I was teaching them and guiding them in their trauma recovery to not only heal, but to get out of the cycle of just circling the drain of, how do I say this? Circling the drain of just surviving. So many people felt that the best they could do was just survive their trauma and never really get over it. And a lot of the psychiatrists and psychologists that I worked with, for me, working through my own complex post-traumatic stress disorder back in the day, would tell me that the best you could do is just survive, and little by little, you'll do better. That just wasn't good enough for me. Now, no judgment. Everybody is different. I'm presenting just my point of view, my perspective on my history, my story. But something inside of me just said, hell no, that is not going to do it for me. I need to find something that would actually guide me toward thriving, thrival, and then eventually creating after abuse, and then eventually simply creating and living my life in my soul print, the contour and character of my unique divinity that is in all of us. We all have it, like into that of a fingerprint. We don't all have the same fingerprint. Boy, that would be kind of crazy, wouldn't it? We all have a unique fingerprint, and to impress that fingerprint, if you will, on the lips of this reality, in my humble opinion, is the highest goal of spiritual living. And that really takes what I'm talking about here, that roar. But like I said, at the time, I wanted to incorporate the orgasmically alive reality, like to reclaim, because I needed to reclaim the orgasmic nature of life, the smelling of a rose, the taste of a strawberry, the gentleness and beauty of holding another person's hand, the feeling of a heart connection, the blessing of a spiritual connection, the feeling of what it feels like, smells like, and tastes like to hug a tree, to put my feet in the grass. I had forgotten, because of the complex trauma that I had lived through the first 23 years of my life, that involved physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, energetic, sexual, physiological, verbal, and anything else that fits in those categories that I missed. Abuse. I was inundated. And I really could not differentiate between reality and what was actually going on and my triggers. So my friends, not only did I develop the ROAR method for anybody out there on this planet that might have some triggers to that you might want to change and not be so triggered in the world. I did it for myself. And then when I found out that that worked, then I started introducing that to the people that I were around at the time, my clients, my work, my business, and they started to get free. So instead of always being triggered, everybody started to tell me that they feel their autonomy and agency and empowerment coming back, and that they were actually living in recovery, and that every day was different. They weren't as reactive. They weren't as inundated with their depression or anxiety or the nightmares or the memories of the past. And that was like, yeah, I know. That's so great. So to look in when you have been severely traumatized is very courageous. So I salute you, first of all. And while I may make light of it now, because it's been some time for me that I've been in that state, I don't by any means mean that it's easy work, but it is very fruitful. It is very fruitful. So going back to the roar method in and of itself, you have to have that lioness energy to be like, hell no. I've lived this way long enough. I'm circling the drain long enough. And I want to take and make that 1 degree shift to just see what else is possible. Because I can, because I choose to, because I know that this can't be my destiny to stay stuck in it. Now, my friends, realize it took me a long time to get there, to find my voice, but it took that lion energy, that ferocity and tenacity to do that. And recently, I realized that the roar isn't so much anymore about living your radically orgasmically alive reality. That's all, it is inclusive in it. But like it was a way of living and creating your life from a space of release, openness, activation, and receiving. So I am now in the process of updating that roar, if you will, to releasing, openness, activating, and receiving. And that's what happens as you look in when you are triggered and say, hard to do in the moment. I was going to say, close your eyes in the moment if you're ever reactive. No, maybe you have to wait until after the moment. Maybe you have to pretend like you have to go to the restroom and close the bathroom door. Put your hand on your heart center. Put your hand on your lower abdomen. Close your eyes and be like, okay, what's going on here? Why am I so triggered? Why do I want to kill this person? Why do I want to slap them across the face? Cancel, clear, delete. Why do I want to grab them by the throat? Cancel, clear, delete. Why do I want to punch a wall? Why do I want to scream? Why do I want to raise my voice? Okay. That's what I mean by trigger. Why can't I sleep? And I'm thinking over and 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 planning and narrating and who I can talk to about this person or situation or event in my head. That's the trigger. It's because of those unconscious beliefs. You either, something got triggered by the situation in the present. Here's the trick. While it happened in the present, it's never just about the present. And that's where the roar method comes in. So please put up the Cage Talks diagram. And that will be up there in a moment. And there's about 5 questions that you can ask yourself when you're triggered. 1, what's going on here? Okay, my daughter, my son, my mother, my partner came in, or a vendor or a boss or a colleague or a coworker. There's the Cage Talk diagram that you can look at. And what I'm talking about here is, what is the presenting problem? This is how you find out if you're triggered according to the roar method. Release, open, activate, and receive. What's the presenting problem? Well, that just means, what just happened? Why am I triggered? You highlight the example, and then you ask yourself, okay, where do I feel that in my body? Is my heart pumping? Is my face feeling red and ashamed? Is my head throbbing? Is there a nut in my gut and I feel kind of nauseous and sick, I can't eat? Or maybe I'm eating because I'm emotionally stressed. Whatever's going on, that's your body. So you go from, here's the situation, to what's going on in my body. Right there and then is the secret sauce about roar. Once you take it off the situation in front of you and you go in, 50% of the problem becomes solved, because you're realizing that, oh, I'm culpable. This is very different than the world, because everybody wants to blame everybody else. Where this came from for me, before I go more into the Cage Talk diagram there, is I remember, I have so many memories of my childhood home in family situation in New York. And I'm going to let you know, I haven't been back there or lived there in over 30 years. Like, I literally had to leave in order to thrive. That was my way of living my roar. Some people, and I have this large family that I have contracted with for a significant period of time, and it's been the greatest blessing because they are all like 26 of them are all part of this huge family, and they're all leaning in to recover from their generational trauma, and all at different levels, but all with the same complex, if you will, post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's such a privilege to be able to do something for others that I couldn't do for my own family system. It's just a contract. No harm, no foul, no shame in it. No blame either. I'm just so grateful to God that I have that possibility, because it's really healed me after I healed, if you will, myself. And when I say healed, I don't mean that I stopped working. I continue to work regularly on that. That's what I deserve. As awake and aware, less triggered, and releasing, opening, activating, and receiving as I can be, has just always been my drive in life, in this lifetime. Anyway, going back to the roar method, you find out what triggered you, and then you go right to the body and put your hand on the body where you feel that, and you ask yourself, where do I feel that in my body? And then the third question is, what does that remind me of? What does that remind me of? Now, this is when you start to get aware of the unconscious beliefs. So please put the document up of the universal unconscious beliefs now. And again, because on that sheet, which will be available as a download for you if you would like, it has the list of the unconscious beliefs, but it also has a column for age, a column for who, what, where, when, why. Try to make this as simple as possible to become your own inner physician. If you notice that the situation with your daughter or your partner or a boss or a family member, whoever it was, triggered you to such the point that you acted differently, you reacted differently than you would normally want to do, therefore you didn't respond, you are in one of these unconscious beliefs cycles, and your cellular memory and neural net pathway already have a fail-safe mechanism to protect you from changing this, is to protect you to just survive it. Well, likely, we haven't gotten there yet, but likely when we get to the decision you made, which is underneath the unconscious belief that I'm going to help guide you to in a moment, the decision you made usually is under the age of 10. And you have been using that same compensatory pattern for good at the age of 10 or less. But now, 30 years later, or in my case, if we're talking about 10, it'd be 46 years later, I'm still doing the same thing I did when I was 10. Cuckoo, 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 right? But if we don't ever stop ourselves to see what our reaction is, we will never know that we're acting like a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old. And it's not your fault. There's no education on this. That's why we look for therapists. That's why we go to meditation trainings. That's why we take coursework. That's why we involve ourselves in continuing education units. That's why we go to spiritual teachers. That's why we hire professionals to coach us through our problems, or work with a psychiatrist and a psychologist on our trauma to find out, what am I blind to that keeps me in this cycle that is actually destroying my life? How is it destroying your life? Conflict just destroys. Every time you're in reaction, every time you're in conflict, it chips away a little bit at the divine connection between you and another soul. And if you're lucky, you have somebody that is equally as committed to lean in as you lean in and grow. But that's not always the case. A lot of times, relationships don't lean in and grow. They lean out and away and separate, which actually fuels more of the unconscious beliefs. So, develop this method because when I started doing this over and over and over, like every day, a couple of times a day, eventually I just became so aware of what I was triggered by that I realized it wasn't even the other person in the present moment. It was actually all the stuff from my childhood that I did not want to deal with. And as I mentioned earlier in this Frequency Friday talk, first 23 years of my life were mired, infiltrated, inundated. Oh God, even just to think about it, with abuses. It was pretty disgusting, actually. And yet, here I am, thriving, alive, happy, with my own family, and just contributing as I wish to the world. And that is a good thing. That is a good thing. So I wish that goodness for you as well. So, whatever the presenting problem is, 1, it's the moment you got triggered. 2, get away from it. Lock yourself, pointing over there because that actually is the door out. Go somewhere else. Close the door. Get involved with yourself. Hand on the heart center. Hand on the lower abdomen. What am I feeling in my body? Where do I feel it in the body? And what does this remind me of? And then take that down of the who why and figure out what belief system it triggered. So let's just say unimportant. Let's just say your partner said something to you and it made you feel unimportant and you felt that in your stomach somewhere. Well, then what you would do is say, okay, what does that remind me of? And feel yourself kind of getting younger and younger, littler and littler, smaller and smaller to one of the first times in your childhood. And this might be hard for some at first to get to their childhood, but it's okay if you get into your teenager years or your 20s or something like that, depending upon your age. It's okay. Just go with the first thing that comes and then start marking it on this paper. Okay, I was 21, I was 10, I was 7. Who was involved? Name the players. What was happening? Name the situation. Where am I? Childhood home, school, football practice, soccer practice. The who, what, why, where, when, and why. And that's all of what it reminds you of. And it's because you felt unimportant. And then the next question, let's put the cage toss image back up, please. Right in the center is, what did I decide? So now you know the age. Now you know the belief. Now you know the who, what, where, when, and why. And now you're asking, God, what did I decide there? Now, you usually decided something with the unconscious belief, I'm unimportant. So if you're unimportant, would you feel like it's good for you to express your feelings? Likely not. If you're unimportant, would you actually think that you would like to put good food in your body if something about good food in your body is an issue? No. If you feel unimportant, does it matter to you if you shower or brush your teeth or do that? Probably not. Those are the subconscious shenanigans we play with ourselves when we have unconscious and unprocessed material from our childhood that is just energetically waiting to be poked at and prodded at for you to complete in this lifetime. I really believe that because that has been my experience. So what did I decide? Well, I decided if I wasn't unimportant, I can tell you something I decided with regards to unimportance. I decided that it didn't matter if I was ever present in any relationship because I was unimportant. So What I did to compensate from that from a very young age, literally starting at the age of 11, was I drank. I snuck any kind of drink, alcohol I'm talking about, that I could possibly do, thinking it was so cool. And I just love the feeling of not feeling anything because I was unimportant. So why should I feel anything? So track with me. Please put the Cage Talks image up on my team if you're still out there so I can follow this. That is the unconscious beliefs. There you go. All right. So here we are. I've already told you what is the presenting problem. Partner says something. I'm triggered. I don't like it. I leave the scene. I ask myself where I feel that in my body, within my stomach, my chest. What does that remind me of? God, it reminds me of when I was in my house or in school and nobody picked me. This is actually a true story. Let's say school, and nobody picked me. None of the girls picked me to play on the schoolyard at lunch. I actually wanted to be with the boys playing handball because I love sports. But I did feel like sitting alone by myself as a child in school, like, oh, wow, this feels really weird and I'm unimportant and I must be different than these people. So let's just say that's what I decided. I'm unimportant. What does that remind me of? I'm 11 years of age. I'm in St. Anne's schoolyard. There's all these girls. I'm by myself. I'm outside on lunch. I already said the when and the why. Why do I feel unimportant? Because nobody picked me to play on their team. What did I decide? I decided I was unimportant. Okay. What that does is leave that belief unimportant unresolved in your cellular memory, but it leaves the conclusion that I'm unimportant. So let's pretend we don't do anything with it, because that's what most people do at the age of 11. You don't do anything with it. And then you become an adult and you get in relationship and you get in work and you have all these other responsibilities and things like that. And somebody, boom, comes in and talks to you snottily, and it triggers that whole unimportance again, and you are immediately catapulted without even knowing it consciously, but feeling it through your body, that you are 11-year-old in the schoolyard not being picked to play with the girls or the boys, and that there's something unimportant about you. So then you decide, well, if I'm unimportant, I don't matter. And then something and some habit and some pattern gets developed after that. And then you wake up 30 years later and you find yourself, hopefully in therapy, trying to figure out why that pattern of unimportance is. In my case, what happened was I had to actually look at the fact that I was part of that 1% of the population, or 1% of the population, that literally had an allergy to alcohol. Started very young. And I learned through getting very aware of this, that importance that made me escape through, or that I chose to escape through alcohol, actually started even before I was 11 years of age. But that's for another time. But that's how the ROAR method works. The release to open to what's going on, to activate and to receive. Before you get into, before we go further, let's say you don't have a therapist. Let's say you don't have the luxury of doing that. You can use this piece of paper and this step work to actually journal yourself through this. You don't have to have a big emotional process. You can basically say, what's going on? Where do I feel it in the body? What does it remind me of? What did I decide? I have all these lists for you to write out and journal and figure it out. And then you could ask yourself, what can I do to change that? So in the moment right now, and now you're an adult, you bring yourself back to the present. Okay, there's an 11-year-old me and there's a 55-year-old me who feels unimportant. Just imagine taking that 11-year-old girl or boy on the schoolyard and having a moment with them, inner child work, and being like, I see you, I hear you, I understand what happened, but that was then, this is now, blah, 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 whatever you want to say to yourself. Journal it out. Give that inner child, that 11-year-old, what you needed then that you didn't get then, and or just say to yourself, okay, I'm not 11 years old anymore. What can I do to change this? Well, right now, I could realize that I am important, that my relationship is important, that I realize that I don't have to go drink. So that's my example, that I actually can connect with my 11-year-old and do some inner child work without actually having to go to a therapist. But I did for very many years do that and couldn't do that work alone. But I can now, and walk out of that room hand in hand with my little girl and letting her know that she is important. And in this moment, I can go back to the person, place, situation, or event and be like, hey, I'm sorry for my part in our conundrum here or conflict. But what happened for me is when you said this and with the tone, it just triggered my body and I felt this. And I was back to being 11-year-old on the schoolyard being unimportant. I'm so sorry. What can I do to make up for the damage done? And that's what you could do to change it. And then you don't have to have, because you talked it out, you processed, you felt in your body, you don't have to have this unconscious belief running your life anymore. You've actually grown past it and got empowered with it and by it. That is essentially the ROAR method. Now, let's put the other image up, please, the second page of the Cage Talks. I included, because I'm all about giving little that can just be downloaded for you to use to be your own inner physician. You just have to take the time to journal this out. This can literally be done in like 15 to 20 minutes. The second part of the Cage Talk, if you want to energetically clear this for yourself, it could be part of the second part of what can I do to change this. You could just literally read this. All the thoughts, feelings, echoes, emotions, patterns, habits, memories, ideas, dreams of what I locked in this case I used money, but of what I locked in about being unimportant, consciously or unconsciously, known or unknown, I now dissolve and dissipate it to the earth, eliminate and eradicate it to the light so that it never comes back, and I refill myself with truth, strength, and clarity. And then I say, universe, show me how to actualize that right now with total ease. I'm grateful and fulfilled, and so it is. And boom, you just gave yourself a therapy session in 15 minutes. Now, I've been talking for about 40 minutes on this just to kind of explain it, but it really can be done in 15 to 20 minutes. I double dog dare you to download this, run yourself through this verbally or journaling it, and let me know how it worked for you. I'm happy to hear from you. This is just a contribution. Use it or not. But I believe that life now, I lived life so full of reaction and downtrodden feelings and obsessive narrations in my head from my own experiences of, like I said. And I'm just not willing to give energy to that so much anymore. Doesn't mean I don't get triggered. I'm just not willing to give as much time and space for that in my life. I have this, I use this, gift it to you as a contribution. And I would love to know if or when you use it, even if it's like a year from now, how it contributed to you. Because all I want for all of us is to release, to open, to activate, and to receive. Because, my friend, you deserve all good, not some, not a little, but all good. It took me a long time to realize that. Nobody wants you to have less than you want to have. It's just because of what we think about ourselves that we choose to have less. Find the subconscious belief that keeps that in place, and you will be free, and you will see how your world will change living outside the cage of abuse. That is ROAR. That is my gift to you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you for listening. We do have a video series in English and Spanish of the ROAR method and me delineating it out in a video series with modules. You are welcome to take a look at that and use it for yourself. Some people really like to download it and do it themselves. Like I said, therapy is a luxury and things are kind of tight and could be kind of tight out there for you. that it might not be a luxury you have, but a luxury that you could afford over time and on your own time. So know that that's there. And I also have these cage talks that I did some time ago on about 10 or 12 different themes: money, the earth, addictions, family. And it runs you through that image I put on the screen here over and over and over. So have a look at that. Again, it's just a contribution to live a life without reactivity. Because if you've had trauma, it can rear its ugly head 20 years later, 30 years later, 10 years later every day. And I want all beings in the world, and especially children, to never have to live the way I lived, going to sleep every night, which was not really sleeping. It was just anxiety producing fear of what was going to happen. That moment, the next moment, when I woke up, I couldn't wait to get away, to get out, and to not live in any kind of environment like that. And that's my ministry and why I keep doing what I'm doing. If this sounds like you, this video series, the Cage Talk, and this free download could be a strategy that could help you. And I'd love to just know if it did. And frankly, even if you do it and I don't know, just know that I'm grateful for you for loving yourself enough to take the risk to find your own unconscious beliefs and know that you deserve all good and that you don't have to live triggered every day. It's a tough thing, but you have the roar, the lion and the lioness inside of you. All right, my friends, if you want to read more about this, where are they? I left my books over there. You've seen them before, but I'm going to go get them. Oh, please. I talk about them in all of my books. Radically Alive Beyond Abuse, I talk about the Roar Method. Lies of Money, I talk about the Roar Method. Creating After Abuse, Living the Roar Method, and the Body of Change, how my body continues to change even to this day as I live, responding, enjoying, loving, and creating a life that I never dreamed possible, but I always had a little sense inside that if I could just keep clearing the muck away with this method, one day wouldn't ever have to really put that much energy into it, and I could just live. Mark my words, it is possible. All right, my friends, remember what I said. You deserve all good, not some, not a little, but all good. Stay in the response. Go in when you're in the reaction. Bye for now.